Okay, welcome everybody. Today I'm going to do a short video on page one so you can see how I do it. I do mine on paper, so if you're having a face-to-face client interaction, I highly recommend you do the same thing. But here we go. So, Mr. Client, let me see your Medicare card. It will look something like this, where I have Part A and I have Part B. Now, Part A is anything that is overnight. That would be hospital stays, that could be skilled nursing, hospice care. In other words, if you go to it and do not come home, you're looking at Part A. Part B is same-day services. So those are things like doctor visits, x-rays, MRIs, CT scans. In other words, if you go to it and come home, it's Part B. Now, before we go into all the different options that you can get into, let me talk about some costs that you have with Original Medicare, okay? With Part A, you have a deductible. That deductible is $1,556. Now, what that does is it covers days 1 through 60. Now, that's not too bad, but the problem starts coming in really heavy when you start getting into days further than that. So days 61 through 90, you have a daily copay of $389. So each and every day that you're in a hospital, they're going to bill you almost $400. Day 61, day 62, day 63, etc., etc., etc. Then from days 91 through 150, it gets even more expensive. You have another daily copay that is $778, and that's each and every day. Now, if you're in the hospital more than 6 months, more than 150 days, Medicare stops paying. You have no coverage at all. So every dollar that the hospital charges, and we know that they charge outrageous rates, those are all going to come to you. Now, Part B, some people will say is not as bad. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but it also has a deductible. That deductible is $226. And once you meet that deductible, then you're paying 20% of all cost. So, to give you an example of what that looks like, if you go to a doctor and that doctor charges $100, you're going to pay the first two out of pocket, and then you'll pay the $26 for the third, and then you'll pay a $20 bill for each visit after that. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm just going to say $20 visit. Now, where Part B gets really scary is when you start talking about things like CT scans and PET scans and things that are thousands of dollars. You have 20% of thousands of dollars, and that can get very expensive. So, no worry. There's a couple of different ways we can fix that. We've got a prepaid path, and we have a pay-as-you-go path. Okay? So I'm going to put this as prepay. A lot of people like to call this the original Medicare path because what you do here is you purchase a Medicare supplement. Now that's going to run you approximately $200 a month to get rid of those costs. Now at that point, the only thing that you have left is you will have to pay the deductible of $226 for your Part B services, but everything else would be covered. Everything under Part A would be covered. That just leaves drug coverage because Medicare supplements do not cover that. So you'll have to get a standalone drug plan, which they call Part D. And those run about $50 a month. So $250 a month times 12 months is going to run you $3,000 a year. So for about $3,000 a year, you can eliminate virtually all these costs except for that Part B premium. Now, some people will say, you know what, that's pretty expensive. I'm not sure I like that, and I don't go to the doctor as much, so why would I do something like that? Well, now there's also Medicare Advantage, or they call it Part C, right? I'll go ahead and put Medicare Advantage. Now, if you haven't heard of those, what those do is they take your A services, which is your overnight, your B services, which is your same-day services, they add drug coverage to it, and then they give you extras. And so in doing that, you have a couple of different options because they're set up very much like plans that you would have from a group employer. So you have the option to choose from either an HMO or a PPO. Now, if you don't know the difference, let me explain that very quickly to you. An HMO is basically a network-based product, which means that your doctors, your hospitals, your specialists, and your pharmacy has to be contracted with a specific insurance company in order for you to visit them and have those services paid. If you go outside of the network, you don't have any coverage. A PPO is built the same way. It has doctors and hospitals and specialists and pharmacies that are contracted. However, you can go outside of the network if you need to. You're just going to pay a little bit more for those services. So let me give you an example of what that would look like. If you went to see a specialist on an HMO, you'd probably spend about a $25 copay, give or take, on that visit. Where on a PPO, you would see that same specialist, even if it's the same insurance company, because it's a PPO, it's going to cost you a little bit more. So let's go ahead and say it's $40, maybe $50, let's say $50 for that copay if they're in network. But if they're out of network, that same visit would cost you $70. So slightly more expensive. And we're going to have multiple companies under the HMO. We're going to have multiple companies under the PPO. We're going to have multiple companies at the supplement level. So what we'll do is we'll look at page 2 to identify what your specific usage will look like. But I wanted you to understand how Medicare works, especially with these costs and the different ways to fix it, so that we can look at your specific needs. That's a quick version of page 1. Hopefully that helps.